First Contact and the Silent Treaty. Across 3 galaxies, the Nexos were more than just a hostile species. They were the embodiment of cosmic terror. Evolved from apex predators on a dying world, they had taken to the stars not in search of knowledge or connection, but with an insatiable hunger that could only be satisfied by conquest and consumption. Their obsidian warships, shaped like elongated mantis heads, had become harbingers of extinction for dozens of spacefaring civilizations. The Nexos didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't establish colonies on conquered worlds. They simply stripped planets of resources, consumed what biomass interested them, and moved on. Their technological advancement wasn't extraordinary. Many species had developed similar capabilities. What made the Nexos unstoppable was their absolute ruthlessness combined with a hive intelligence that allowed them to coordinate attacks with terrifying precision. Humanity's expansion into the stars had been relatively peaceful until that point. After mastering fusion propulsion and developing the Alcubierre drive that allowed faster-than-light travel, Earth had established colonies on Mars, Europa, and eventually ventured to nearby star systems. Diplomatic relations had been established with the Vexari, an ancient race of philosophers and scientists, and the trade agreements with the mercantile Krell had brought prosperity to human settlements. But humans were still considered newcomers to the galactic community, unpredictable, emotional, and dangerously curious. The established species tolerated them, but kept humanity at arm's length, unwilling to share their most advanced technologies or invite them into defensive pacts. When the Nexos entered the Tau Ceti system, humanity faced its first existential threat from the stars. Captain Ilara Reed of the UES Dauntless was overseeing a routine resource extraction operation in the asteroid belt of Tau Ceti when the proximity alarms blared. 3 Nexus destroyers had appeared at the edge of the system, their distinctive chitinous hulls absorbing rather than reflecting light from the distant sun. Status report, Reed demanded, rising from her command chair as the bridge crew scrambled to their stations. Lieutenant Commander Chin's fingers flew over the tactical console. 3 Nexos vessels, Captain. Class 4 destroyers. They've already destroyed the automated warning buoys at the system's edge. Their weapons are hot. Reed's face remained impassive, but her mind raced. The mining operation included 4 transport vessels filled with civilians, a research station with 37 scientists, and her own ship, a light cruiser with decent shields but limited offensive capabilities. The nearest military reinforcements were 3 days away at best. Send an emergency broadcast to command. Encryption level Omega, Reed ordered, and connect me to the resource station and all transport captains. What are our orders, Captain? Asked her first officer, a weathered veteran named Heikida. Reed studied the tactical display. Conventional wisdom said you couldn't fight the Nexus. You could only run and hope they didn't follow. No one had ever successfully negotiated with them. No one had ever defeated them in direct combat unless they had overwhelming numerical superiority. We're evacuating the civilians, she decided. The transports will use the star's radiation to mask their exit vectors. We'll provide cover. Cover, Captain. Takeda's voice dropped to just above a whisper. Against the Nexus. Precisely, Commander. Reed's eyes never left the tactical display. I have no intention of dying today, and I certainly won't allow them to harm our people. Within 20 minutes, the civilian transports were accelerating away from the mining operation, their trajectories carefully calculated to use the star's electromagnetic interference as camouflage. The research station had initiated emergency shutdown procedures, its staff boarding the last remaining shuttle. The Nexus ships had changed course, heading directly toward the largest concentration of human activity, the mining operation where the Dauntless now stood alone. They'll be in weapons range in 3 minutes, Captain, Chen reported. All hands to battle stations, Reed commanded. Power to shields, and open a channel on all frequencies. The communications officer looked surprised. To the Nexos, they'd never responded to communication attempts. Today might be different, Reed replied. Do it. When the channel opened, Reed stood tall, her voice clear and measured. This is Captain Elara Reed of the United Earth ship Dauntless. You have entered human territory without authorization. Our civilians are evacuating, and we request you withdraw your vessels immediately. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew the Nexus didn't negotiate. Everyone knew they didn't respond to communications. Everyone knew what came next. But what happened instead would become legend. The Nexus ships slowed their approach. For 37 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, impossibly, a response came, not in words, but in a series of clicking sounds and electromagnetic pulses that the ship's computer struggled to interpret. They're communicating. The communications officer's voice rose in disbelief. Before anyone could respond, the tactical officer shouted, "Energy spike." There. He paused, confusion evident in his voice. They're powering weapons, but not targeting us. They're leaving. The bridge fell silent as they watched the Nexus vessels turn away, accelerating toward the edge of the system as abruptly as they had arrived. Captain Reed sank into her chair, her composed expression finally giving way to bewilderment. Log everything, she ordered. Every signal, every maneuver, every energy reading. Something just happened that's never happened before, and I want to know why. News of the encounter spread quickly through human space. The miracle at Tau Ceti, they called it. Some believed Reed had discovered some weakness in the Nexus that forced them to retreat. Others theorized that the Nexus had simply been scouts, gathering intelligence for a larger invasion force. The truth wouldn't emerge until 6 months later, when a captured communication relay from a distant Nexus battle group was decrypted by Earth intelligence. The message, translated from the complex Nexus biochemical signal patterns, was simple but chilling. Avoid the bipedal mammals called humans. They are not prey. They are not enemies to be conquered. They are something else entirely. Appended to the message was the sensor data from the Tau Ceti encounter, specifically the detailed scans of the Dauntless and its crew. The Nexus had detected something about humanity that disturbed them on a fundamental level, something that overrode even their insatiable hunger for conquest. When Captain Reed was called to Earth Intelligence Headquarters to be briefed on the findings, she sat in stunned silence as Admiral Quan explained. It appears the Nexus function on a hive mentality, not just socially, but neurologically. Their brains are networked within each ship, creating a unified consciousness. This is how they coordinate so effectively in battle, Quan said, sliding a data tablet across the conference table. But human brains showed up on their scans as something entirely foreign to their experience. Reed studied the comparative neural mappings. I don't understand. Individualism, Captain. The concept of independent thought is apparently repulsive to them. Their scans showed dozens of independent neural networks. Your crew, working in coordination, but maintaining separate identities. According to their communications, they found this fractured consciousness deeply disturbing, almost terrifying. Reed looked up from the tablet. They're afraid of us? The Nexus, the species that's destroyed entire civilizations. Not afraid in the way we understand fear, Quan clarified. It's more like revulsion, instinctive avoidance, like how some humans are intrinsically disturbed by certain insects or reptiles. So they left because we discussed them. Reed couldn't decide whether to be relieved or offended. They left because they recognized something dangerous, Quan corrected, something unpredictable. To a hive mind like the Nexus, individual consciousness represents chaos, multiple decision points that can't be anticipated or controlled, and if there's one thing predators universally avoid, it's prey they don't understand. In the months that followed, the pattern repeated itself. Nexus ships would appear at the edges of human-controlled systems, then quickly withdraw once they confirmed human presence. No attacks, no communication, just recognition and retreat. Humanity had gained an unexpected advantage in the dangerous frontier of space, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the simple fact of their individual consciousness, something they had always taken for granted. What makes humans different? Deep in the nebulous regions between the Orion and Perseus arms, the Nexos high ship, Eternal Hunger, drifted in the radioactive clouds that served as both camouflage and sustenance for its massive biological systems. Within its neural chamber, the Coordinator, the focal point of the hive's collective consciousness, communicated with subordinate vessels across 3 galaxies. The subject that dominated these communications was humanity. "They are wrong," pulsed the Coordinator, its thoughts transmitted through biochemical signals. "Their minds are fractured, yet they function. They make decisions without consensus. They act with purpose despite internal conflict. This defies natural law." From a nearby system came the report of another encounter. A human mining vessel had been detected by a Nexos scout. The scout had immediately withdrawn, following the new protocol. The memory of first contact with humans remained vivid in the collective consciousness. The Nexos had approached the human vessel, expecting the usual pattern: fear, desperation, futile resistance, and finally consumption. Instead, their sensory apparatus had detected something unprecedented. In all other species encountered by the Nexus, consciousness existed as a unified field. Even in non-hive species, individual minds followed predictable patterns. Fear triggered specific responses. Threat produced measurable reactions. The neural architecture was consistent, comprehensible. Human minds were different. When the Nexos scanned the human vessel at Ta Ceti, they detected dozens of neural networks operating independently yet somehow coordinating without the biochemical synchronization the Nexos understood as consciousness. More disturbing still, these fractured minds exhibited unpredictable emotional states: fear mixed with resolve, anger alongside curiosity, doubt paralleling determination. To the Nexos hive mind, this represented something fundamentally wrong, a violation of the natural order. How could a fractured consciousness make decisions? How could a species function when each individual might act differently when faced with identical stimuli? The incident at Proxima Station 2 years after first contact only reinforced this unsettling impression. Commander Marcus Thorne had been overseeing the evacuation of Proxima Research Station when 3 Nexus raiders appeared in the system. Following established protocol, Thorne ordered immediate evacuation, but quickly realized the civilian transports wouldn't escape in time. With only his patrol vessel, the UES Harrier, against 3 Nexus ships, conventional tactics offered no hope. But Thorne had studied every report on Nexos encounters, including the classified findings from Ta Ceti. "They find our minds disturbing," he told his tactical officer. "So let's give them something truly unsettling to consider." Thorne ordered his communications officer to broadcast on all frequencies, not coherent messages, but a cacophony of human emotional expressions. Laughter, screams, whispered threats, children's songs, funeral dirges, all played simultaneously, while the Harrier executed a series of seemingly random maneuvers, accelerating toward the Nexus ships rather than away. To an outside observer, the human vessel appeared to be behaving irrationally, perhaps damaged or commanded by someone insane. To the Nexus, who perceived reality through the lens of perfect consensus, the human ship represented something far worse, a consciousness so fractured it defied comprehension. The Nexos vessels broke formation, their usual perfect coordination disrupted by conflicting threat assessments. The Harrier slipped through their disorganized response, launching a barrage of missiles not at the Nexus ships themselves, but at the space between them. The resulting electromagnetic pulse didn't damage the Nexus vessels significantly, but it disrupted their neural synchronization briefly, long enough for confusion to ripple through their collective consciousness. What happened next would become a turning point in human-Nexus relations. The 3 Nexus ships, momentarily unable to achieve consensus, retreated in 3 different directions. For the first time in recorded history, a Nexus battle group had demonstrated disunity. When synchronization was eventually restored, the Nexus Collective made a civilization-defining decision. Humans would be classified not as prey, not as enemies, but as chaos beings, entities whose very existence represented a threat to ordered consciousness. This classification spread quickly through the Nexus Collective. Within a year, human vessels could travel with near impunity through regions where other species feared to venture. The predictable predatory nature of the Nexus had become humanity's greatest advantage, their absolute unwillingness to engage with what they could not comprehend. Admiral Kwan explained it to the United Earth Council this way. The Nexos aren't afraid of us in the conventional sense. They're disturbed by us on an existential level. Our individuality, something we consider fundamental to our identity, represents a form of consciousness so alien to them that they cannot process it within their worldview. So they just avoid us, asked Counselor Rodriguez, skepticism evident in her tone. Precisely, Kwan confirmed. Think of how certain patterns or images can trigger discomfort in humans. Trypophobia, for instance. Now imagine that discomfort magnified and applied to an entire species. The Nexos perceive our fractured consciousness as fundamentally wrong, a violation of what they understand as the natural order. And this protection extends to all human vessels, asked another counselor. All vessels with sufficient human presence, yes. Our research suggests that a minimum of 5 human minds is enough to trigger the Nexus avoidance response. We've already adapted our merchant fleet protocols to ensure every ship meets this threshold. In the decades that followed, humanity's position in interstellar politics transformed dramatically. Species that had once viewed humans as impulsive newcomers now sought their protection. Trade routes through Nexus-controlled regions, previously considered suicidal, became viable when human crews were present. The Vexari philosophers developed a new term for humanity's unique advantage: cognitive deterrence, the ability to repel threats not through force, but through the fundamental nature of human consciousness itself. Not everyone was comfortable with this new status. Captain Reed, now Admiral Reed, often reminded her officers that relying on the Nexos aversion was dangerous. They're still evolving, still adapting, she would warn. Today's instinctive avoidance could become tomorrow's calculated risk. Her caution proved prescient when reports emerged of Nexos experiments with isolated human captives, attempts to understand and potentially overcome their aversion to fractured consciousness. These experiments invariably failed, as the Nexos couldn't maintain neural coherence in proximity to human minds, but the attempts themselves signaled a disturbing evolution in Nexos behavior. Yet the fundamental equilibrium held. Human ships traveled unmolested through Nexus territory, while humanity expanded its defensive capabilities, preparing for the day when the predators might overcome their instinctive revulsion. The most profound change, however, was in humanity's self-perception. The knowledge that their individual consciousness, something they had always taken for granted, represented their greatest strength against the cosmos' most feared predators, inspired a renaissance in human philosophy and psychology. "We are not stronger than the Nexus," wrote Dr. Elena Sheriff in her seminal work on xenopsychology. "We are not more technologically advanced. We are simply different in a way they cannot assimilate or overcome. Our greatest vulnerability, our lack of consensus, our internal conflicts, our individual perspectives, has proven to be our greatest strength." As human ships continued to sail unmolested through the dangerous seas of space, a silent understanding existed between predator and prey that was not prey. The fractured minds of humanity would continue their chaotic expansion across the stars, while the perfect consciousness of the Nexus would maintain its distance, unwilling to risk contamination by the disturbing plurality that defined human existence. In the vast coldness of space, in the face of a universe filled with dangers, humanity had found unlikely sanctuary in the very thing that had often divided them on Earth: their stubborn, chaotic individuality.